Ben Laws is a seasoned entrepreneur with over 20 years experience owning and leading a successful financial firm. Ben is an expert at helping people find their roadmap to joy. In 2019, he launched Evexia Wealth, a company dedicated to transforming how people think and feel about money so they can confidently grow their wealth. I'm excited to talk to Ben about the way he's integrated unique ability collaboration, entrepreneurship, and coaching into his journey, which he's especially qualified to talk about because Ben is an associate coach with Strategic Coach. That means we've got two coaches on this podcast, and I'm the odd man out on this one. But Ben, I'm so excited to get into it. Welcome to the next level.
Welcome. Thank you so much for having me. When I got the invite, I couldn't wait to get on here, especially with all the neat stuff that you guys are doing in the world. This is next level. So anyways, thanks for having me.
Our pleasure. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah.
I just want to start really high level because, in your background, you've got 20 plus years of experience. But relatively recently, you've started this new venture in 2019. So call it last 5 years here. Also right before COVID, which is interesting. I want to get into that. But I know you've got the relatively new venture. I know you've got some new work that new businesses that you're launching. Kind of just give us a sense of how you got here, and maybe to borrow a little bit of coach speak, I would love to hear about any sort of ceilings of complexity along the way that really stand out or inflection points in your journey to where you are today.
Well, it's a great question, Ryan. And what I really love about it, and it just hit me as you're asking the question, was that my evolution over the last 21 years in the financial services industry actually reflects a lot of my own personal identity. When I came into the industry back in 2004, it was I had left college early. Took W's second semester of my junior year, and a lot of people thought I was nuts. And for me, it seems relatively if I'm going to fail, I might as well just go epic now. And worst case scenario, I come back and I'm a 5th or 6th year senior. But what I'm realizing that the journey is, when I started, it was just I was coming in as an advisor, right? And I think about this in the evolution of where I think a lot of business owners go is that there are operators, and then there are business owners, and then there are entrepreneurs. And so back in 2004, I came in and I was like, I just want to be an operator, because I didn't even actually understand what it meant to actually really own my own business. I was like, they didn't have a lot of impact. And growing up, my dad always said there's 3 things that people fought about. It was sex, kids, and money. And I knew I didn't want to do with the first 2. So the third one seemed to be really important. But I came in as an operator. And as through that evolution, I realized that it was really lonely to just climb mountains by yourself. So then I wanted to build a team. And that's where I started to transition from an operator into a business owner mindset, because again, I grew up in a household where my dad was a pastor, so he was sort of like a pseudo entrepreneur. And the fact is, he could set his own schedule, but at the same time, the if you want to say the widget was in terms of being engaged in people's lives, right? My mom was a nurse, and so I was surrounded by a lot of just loving up on people. So when I came into the industry, it really was I wanted to be meaningful. I wanted to be great. And quite frankly, it was about the blind really leading the blind, being I just knew I was being pulled forward by something. And then as I started building a team, I was like, hey, you know what? This rugged individual, using strategic coach speak, is that, it just isn't working. And I want to build a team. But then it was well, how do I build a team? And then I built a team, and then had to tear the team down, and then started to slowly really build it back in. And up until 2015, when I actually joined Strategic Coach, I was maybe said I own a business. And one of the first exercises you do, and Stephen, you might have even talked about this on the show, is that we ask everyone to stand up in the first workshop to say hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm from here, and I'm an entrepreneur specializing in fill in the blank. And I remember going, what am I actually an entrepreneur in? And that was really the first time that I was wait, this entrepreneur. And if you actually look at the word entrepreneur in French, it actually means to swim out, right? So when you think going back, I actually was an entrepreneur when midway through like my college career, I decided to swim out, right? And not only that, but throughout my my financial services career, it was like, you know what? I didn't want to just like tackle mountains by myself and have the acknowledgement. I wanted to have something that was bigger than me, right? And it was like swimming away from what the industry was doing. And then how we built our business along the way, and some of the things we did was swimming out away from what the industry was. And to like 2019 when we launched Evexia Wealth, it was the unique ability, vision, so to speak, of what I had actually wanted. I wanted a company that was built off of culture and experience that just happened to specialize in financial services. And it's also, I think it's actually a model that I think I could actually right now start any business and go, this is a company that is an experience, culture forward company that happens to specialize in fill in the blank. And that's been sort of the journey of along the way.
Ben, one thing you mentioned in that I think was interesting that you kind of went through quickly. The idea of building a team and then tearing it down and rebuilding it. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Like what were the signs? You know, what did you learn?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, Stephen. It's really the first time I've actually talked about this like really like publicly. But when I first built the team, I built it based off of like who are the people that I trusted, and I started building a team, and it ended up being in terms of a lot of people that I knew. When I say people that I knew, I started like hiring family, right? First person I hired who still is with me today, she's my chief innovation manager, was my sister, Beth. At the end of the day, what I realize now that her and I have been collaborating for 41 years, like been unique ability. And now they have like words to like put around it. You know, then I hired my brother-in-law, and then I hired like my mom, and then I hired my aunt into this. And what I realized was that one of the crucial aspects that was true about me doing that was that people that you trust, the culture of coming from similar frame of reference. But the thing that didn't necessarily work out was two factors. Number one, the industry at the time when I did this, like when I was building, at least in my company, my broker dealer at the time, no one was doing this. And so the economics weren't necessarily there. But not only that, but I didn't have anything tangible to go, well, why did I hire you for this position? Right. It was just sort of like kind of like a shotgun going, if I just hire these people, like I have a team. Right. And so what I realized, there's a couple different things, is that my brother-in-law actually got an opportunity to actually go launch on his own. So for me, it was the first time for me to pour in to him to say like, yeah, you should go do this. Right. And which was really cool. It was hard because we had great synergy together, but at the end of the day, it ended up being a really great thing, which coincidentally enough is that one of the companies that I launched called Elation Lab, which is a digital video production company, he actually is like the head creative for that company. And so in terms of, let's come back full circle here, you know, that was just like in the last like 2 years. So it's probably been about 13 years where we had from that point. And so he left, and it was pretty humbling, especially when you have to have this conversation. It's not just like, hey, we have we work together, but it was like when it's people that you see at Christmas and Easter and Thanksgiving, and you just go, yeah, this isn't working. Like this doesn't have like the ability to scale and actually have longevity. I always think of a lot of things I want to do. The word I always think about is it timeless? Right? Is this relationship timeless? Is how we're building this timeless? Is the look of this timeless? Is the culture of this timeless? And it has the right idea, right direction, but it didn't have the ability to be timeless. But I will tell you, it gave me the seeds of what had to be true when I actually started building a team. And then I have to just, and I know, Stephen, you probably plugged this a bunch, if I'm sure you have, and but I'm sure you plugged it a bunch, but strategic coach started to allow me to put names on things, and then people, and it's the relationships in there. And I started meeting other entrepreneurs. I mean, Stephen, that's how I met you, right?
Yeah.
Was
Yep.
Through there. So yeah.
So I'm curious, you have in there that you optimized for trust in who you hired, brother-in-law, aunt, sister. I want to talk more about maintaining family relationships in business, how you get in and out of them, because you can fire and change your team, but you can't change your family, right? I want to get more into that. But you also said that you were optimizing for trust. You're in a high trust industry. Did you get more comfortable with the discomfort of hiring people you didn't know, or did you develop some method when you're hiring people now that you can establish high levels of trust? Because I think that's universally interesting to whoever is in a hiring position, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, again, apologize to all your listeners that I'm going to reference back, being an associate coach for strategic coach means that it's DNA deep in me. But one of the things we talk about is a self-managed company. And for me, if you were to the genesis of self-managed and go back down to one word, I think that that's trust. And I think that early on, I knew that I wanted to have people that I could trust so that I could literally do my job. I don't want to manage people. I don't want to, like, I very much think of our organization. It's not like a pyramid in terms of I happen to be CEO. It's actually an inverted, where the piece is that, like, I'm actually the one that's working for them. And that requires a great deal of trust that's going to happen. The fact is being like, hey, like, I'm going to pour into you, and I'm trusting the fact is that you want to pour into whoever we're working with, and then pour into your teammates. And I think that takes a lot of trust. And I think the thing that for me that I realized was that you can hire for, like, skills, right? You can teach skills. But I found that the quickest conduit to trust was finding people that best aligned with my heart. I know it sounds maybe frou-frou-y, but, like, so if you go into our website, like, it is very much like, it speaks full of, like, my heart. Like, our core values are on there. When we talk about, like, the hiring, what we're really looking for is, like, incredible people who can show up every day. And, here's our core values: and curate insanely awesome experience, that are heroes for others, that create value in all they do, who are willing and wanting to tackle big challenges, and who are willing to focus on a bigger and better future, right? And who come with a really good heart. Because I found that, boy, good heart, trust is a fruit that falls off that tree all the time.
Yeah, we have a way of talking about it, because, as you might imagine, in the executive assistant entrepreneur relationship, trust is also critical, of course, and so that's always on our mind. And we talk about it in terms of, it's a bank account where you make deposits rather than a vase that breaks and shatters into a million pieces. And that's been a really helpful way, I think, for us to think about, and to help try to reframe trust for the folks that we've been working with. And I love the way that you reduced self-managing company down to trust, because I think that's exactly right. I think that's a really great new perspective on a concept that's familiar to anybody in the coach universe.
Yeah. And I think one of the other things that you had talked about was, in terms of a family, like, I think there's a lot of people who maybe shy away because it's like, oh, I'll never do business with family. And there's a couple different things. I feel a call. The fact is that what we do creates value, and we happen to get compensated for that value. And who would I want to share that? Like, think of that when you have, like, these mountaintop moments. Who do you want to share that with? Right? So for me, it's very real. Like, my triad, if you want to say, in my team, is that my wife is her and I have been business partners, for now going on almost 12 years. My sister, I mean, like I said, we've been collaborating for 41 years, but she has been with me 6 months into the business. I realized is I needed someone. I needed someone to give me, like, that accountability, which, by the way, just as an aside and a plug, when I was thinking about what you guys do for the world, I heard a quote from Gary Vee, and he said, there's a direct correlation between happiness and accountability. And that's actually what, in terms of like an executive assistant, it's actually the accountability aspect of it. And the reason why I wanted to be an entrepreneur anyways, because as I wanted to have like great joy. So just as like a soft plug for it, if you don't have accountability, like you're missing out on 10x like happiness, like just is a hard stop. So accountability equals happiness. So, but I think going back to with the family piece here is that I have 3 people that I trust implicitly. So I make it up, and Beth, my sister, and Jenna, my wife, are in charge of taking this vision that I have and making it real, make it reoccur. And so as an entrepreneur, it's the thing that I like to we give birth. Like a vision just comes from nothing, right? You think about children, right? The miracle of what children are, it's just like, there wasn't a child, and then boom. In a second, it was there. Right? And you just think about that for a moment. And that's sort of like what a vision is, and what entrepreneurs do is there wasn't something there. And then, right?
Ben, I just got to tell you that mine takes a little longer than that. Just, I'm messing with you, buddy. Hey, I'm messing with you. I am really curious about this conversation. I love the trust, like Ryan said. I love the simplification of, self-managing company down to trust. One of the things I'm really curious about, though, is how that fits inside of a really big vision. I've been around you enough to know that you've got a really big vision for yourself. And one of the things that I think is a challenge when you have a really big vision is that you can trust people at a certain level, and then you can grow to a level to which, not that you don't trust them and their character, but they're maybe not capable of fulfilling that vision. And circling back to this idea of working with family, I'm curious how that plays out in your mind.
Yeah. Oof. I love the follow on of that. And the answer that came to my head immediately was that Dan Sullivan had said, he's like, what has more power, being in charge or being in control? And I was like, man, that's like really good. And I think the thing that with trust, as your vision gets bigger and as your team gets bigger, because both of those things are complexities, right? Big vision, and then also as your company scales and just gets bigger, is I think that what I've realized is that if you want to be in control, you are going to reach a ceiling of complexity of like trust, right? Of allowing someone to get through into beyond in terms of what you think they're capable of. But when you move from that seat of being in control of everything and knowing the fact is that you're in charge, and that at any point you can actually go in and take their 80% that they've done, right? Because let's face it, there's not very many people in this world that maybe makes it through your hiring filter, your culture filter, your core values filter, your training program, that they're not going to, at a minimum, be able to bring 80% of what it is that you were wanting them to do, right? And that's where that last 20% really comes in, is the fact is that I think when you're in charge, it's a trust enhancer. It's a trust extender, because you know that you can come in, is that it changes the narrative that these people don't know anything. Like, what are they doing? Like, they just don't get it, to much more of one where it's like, hey, you know what? They're wanting to win. And the reality is that they're bringing their best. And the reality is they maybe just haven't seen it in a different shade. And the reality is, if I can help them see it in a different shade, like, that extra 20% might be the biggest hunt. And so I think that as your vision gets bigger, it really goes back to, again, another Dan Sullivan quote where he said, like, hey, you're not a leader unless you're creating other leaders. And I think that, and that really goes back to, if you're trying to be in control, you're actually trying to be the leader, versus in charge means that you're allowing other people the opportunity to, quote unquote, potentially fail. And it's in the failing that you actually see and earn the trust, right? Because what do you do when they fail, right? Are you a complainer? Are you, integrity? Like, hey, I won't let you know on me, but here's what I learned. That was the most epic reward for a potential mistake or failure, was the fact is that, like, wow, you got it, you owned it, and you were able to communicate it. Like, I just going to give you another 10% help being a trust. So I don't know if that answers your question, Stephen, but that's how I view it.
Yeah, it's a great answer, and I don't know that it's a fair question because maybe you haven't experienced it yet. But I'm always challenged with this idea because I know how important family is to people, and I see this idea of family sometimes it either goes really well or it struggles, and there are times where you can have all the trust in the world. I've seen this even with myself, where I've grown a business to the point where there was just no desire to continue to be a part of that future growth. Like it had really almost outgrown me and needed someone else. It wasn't that I wasn't trustworthy. It was just there's that point, right? And so with family, that seems like a tougher conversation if they've been there all the way along and you have Easter, Christmas, and Thanksgiving together, you know? So
yeah. I think the thing that this is what I would say, if people are engaging in family, I think if you're having open, honest, and transparent, and really from a place of love conversations, not everyone's going to stick around with you. And that's the biggest like fear that people have is like, well, what happens if you outgrow them?
Mm-hmm.
What happens if they all of a sudden are given like this, like they've given like been inflamed and all of a sudden start to have their own vision, right, of what they want to do that might be different than yours. And I think if you are the entrepreneur, I think it's so important that we are always expanding and ever expanding. And if you gave someone that gift of the fact is for them to be part of that ride until where it was like, hey, you know, maybe they're just, their juices run out, or you've helped them inflame so that they want to go do something else. I think the way to look at it as a potential hard conversation is that it's a gift, right? And it's just like in this idea of birth. Like if it takes it's birthing, it's like sometimes the pain of getting vision into reality. Sometimes letting like your like someone who's been in your birth and like your vision, letting them go is like just as hard as like watching your kid go off to college and like be like adult, but it's necessary.
How do you, I mean, and maybe this is something that I picked up from other conversations I've had with people who have loved ones in their business. This sensitivity to creating the perception of a two-tier system where certain conversations are held with family members in a different context and a different manner than with other team members who aren't family members, right? And of course, you've got other team members who are certainly aware that they won't be sitting at your Thanksgiving table and that there are people in the business who will be. How do you think, do you feel an obligation, a necessity to communicate about that? Or how do you show, maybe this is the better example, in how you lead the business, that everybody is treated the same, right? That presumably, I imagine you're treating your other team members in the same manner that you treat your family. How does that show up, though? Because I know that that's something that creates a little bit of head trash for folks.
Yeah, I think for me, it's always been really clear that we are a value creation organization, like hard stop. We are a culture organization, hard stop. We are an experience organization, hard stop. And I think it's one of the things that I think everyone really understands, and I think everyone is held accountable. I think the thing that I see probably more with dealing with family members is that you have a potential tendency to not bring the same sort of professionalism to your family than you are to someone, you know. And if my wife was to hop in here, she would go like, hey, like when I've maybe done something that maybe we're not like on the same page with, like how you have a conversation with someone else on our team might be a little bit different than you have it with me, right? And so I actually think the thing about having family is that it forces you to actually become a better communicator, right? Because the difference is someone who shows up who is on the team is I have zero baggage that comes along with it, zero sort of like frame of reference, right? Zero sort of things that might have been happening in terms of like what's happening in the day to day in our personal life all of a sudden sometimes can flow over into there, right? And I think anyone who's ever been married knows the fact is that oftentimes, like, you may have a conversation with your significant other, and I like to call them marital conversations that don't necessarily go well, but quite frankly, sometimes has nothing to do with actually the thing that actually we're talking about. Has everything to do maybe something like 2 days like earlier, right? That you just
For
so
sure.
for me, I actually think that dealing with family has forced my hand on me to become more emotionally mature in handling big emotions.
Nice.
Because
Nice. That's interesting.
yeah, because like, hey, like if you would talk to this person like in like a really civil, professional, encouraging, aspiring way, like why wouldn't I do that, with someone that I love and respect, right? They're family, right? And so and I know that everyone out here is listening has had like those moments like with your your significant other, your kids, you don't have to work, by the way, with them to realize what I'm saying has like some roots in it.
Yeah, no, there's universal applicability to what you're saying. It transcends just a business context, of course. So you've mentioned this, shifting gears a little bit, but culture has certainly come up quite a few times in your answers already. Experience has been another theme that always follows on closely to culture. And we hear a lot of folks talk about creating culture in their business and how they promote and foster culture and what it means to promote a good culture. I hear less frequently people talk about what it means to really inject intentionality and experience into the business. I'd love to learn more about what that word means to you, how you're doing it in your business, what we can learn from that, because that's much less common for me to hear about.
Yeah. Well, I think it's Peter Drucker has a famous saying is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And I just recently heard that actually this last week, and I was like, ooh, that is so good. Because to me, culture is really about, like, you can pay people, right, and show them their value. But in my mind, culture is really the definition of it for me is this, is that you can't ask people to care about you before you've cared about them first. And culture is your way of showing, prove it, right? Like, show me, like pour into me, like want something more from me than maybe I want it for myself, right? Because what I feel like what ends up happening is a lot of companies have like this idea of like, whoa, we're culture forward, right? But are you helping them develop as not just a leader professionally, but a leader for who they are as in their different identities, right? Because let's face it, the things that matter most to them are the things are potentially outside of work, like who they are as a parent, a spouse, a friend, a sibling, right? And I think that culture really is about pouring into them so that when they show up, and again, this is actually Jen and I, our big bet is that we believe is that if we pour into them and help them win so much personally, is that who they show up professionally, like I just have to believe. Worst case scenario, bare minimum, they show up a happier person. And I mean, not to equate this down to like to like cows. I live in the state of Wisconsin, right? But like what they found was that cows that were happy produce more milk. Same cow. It's like they didn't have to go through and like give a ton more like supplements and different foods. So they literally would have it like they play music in there, right? Different lighting, making sure that their floors are clean, right? And like they're different like bedding and that like they have more free range and being outside time, right? And again, I want to just be really clear. I'm not equating to people who we all work together as that they're like cows. But in my mind, if that works for just like that, I'm just going as an entrepreneur, if I just focus on that aspect of helping them be happy and healthy and wealthy, worst case scenario for me, whether they're here or they decide to move on, man, I can literally look back and go, man, I am so wealthy right now, regardless of what the business production is. But the flip side of that is if they are truly showing up in all of these incredible ways, number one, what a fun place to be. Not only that, but you know that their family's winning, right? Then you know our teammates are all winning together. that's what to me like has been so fascinating about culture, is that don't just talk about it, but prove it. Right? Like,
is that how you because Ryan asked about experience. So when you think of culture, you're thinking about the experience of your team members, are you thinking of experience of your clients, or I mean obviously they go hand in hand.
Yeah. So JW, yes, it's a yes and yes. JW Marriott, I was maybe about 12 years ago. I was on a Delta flight, and just as an aside, the fact that they can turn safety instructions into a monetary like product is amazing. Just an aside, but
Delta
JW Marriott
sucks.
had, JW Marriott had this.
Delta fan.
He's going to start a holy war here. You're about to step into about a decade worth of argument we've had, Ben. Careful now.
Okay, well, I'll skirt around that one. I'll go on the outskirts here. But JW Marriott had this commercial, and it had all like this B-roll and people interacting that looked clearly not clients, but were actual like teammates in there. And they said something that changed the trajectory of like my life forever. It said, experience first starts with how we treat each other. And I was like, whoa, because here's the thing, everyone experiences the world, right? Like before I got on here, I had like a technological like issue hopping on here, but I called their tech person and they got it done within 3 minutes. So if you said, how was it? I could say, well, that was super efficient. Or I could say, he was a lifesaver, right? So when I say he's a lifesaver, everyone here has a moment where they go, oh man, like you feel that. And so my mind is that, like, I believe that in terms of how we treat our team is going to be reflected as a natural outcome to all of our clients. And it's going to create something that you can't commoditize. When you eat and you have something and you can't quite figure out what that extra taste is, it's called umami, because it's not definable, but it has this different things. And you can go to like a chef who's like amazing at creating like beautiful looking food. But then you can go to someone who maybe doesn't make it look beautiful, but they cook it with love. And there's just something extra. And you just go, I'm going to remember that meal for the rest of my life. I think we do the same thing as entrepreneurs. And the meal that we cook and that we plate and that we set the table for is our team. And we do it every single day. And we have service after service after service, right? We have table after table after table. And I think that, to me, culture is basically the natural outcome of being an experience forward company. Right. So, if that makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. There is, it made me think of the way I'm hearing you talk about your team, the experience, pouring into people, loving on people. It kind of took my mind to a divergent path. And I'm curious. You said your dad was a pastor, your mother was a nurse. How is financial services like being a pastor? And how is it different?
Oh man, I feel like we should phone a friend to see and have my dad here to go. I think that, so we created Evexia Wealth, and the word, people go off and say, where's the word Evexia come from? And it's a Greek word. And it really was the word we tried to find that could denote this word, but just give a little context to it, is that the word wealth is broken down, wheel, and the TH means the condition of well-being. So when you think about, in terms of when people think about wealth, it's often about like how much money they have, how much money they've saved, the rate of return, how much stuff they have. And so I think about, in terms of like what it means to be like what we do, is that we're ministering the same thing that we're talking about in terms of why people go to church, right? Because they're looking for purpose. They're trying to find purpose. They're looking for happiness. They're looking for a sense of peace and security. And I think that a lot of what we're trying to do is help people find that condition of well-being. Just think about that. Well and being, not becoming, but being. And I think that a lot of what I got to witness with my dad is that, like, he got to see people in their happiest moments and also some of like their saddest moments, right? Whether it's like someone passed. I mean, I remember multiple times my dad, I'd hear kind of the phone ring a little bit and wake up a little bit and hear the door slam at like 2 a.m. And my dad was just actually telling me this last weekend. Here, I was asking him about like, hey, have you got when's the last time you got a speeding ticket? And he's like, he's like, I've only gotten one in my adult life. But he's telling me about how he was traveling to a community hospital. It was about 30 minutes away, and he was speeding. He knew he was speeding, but because he'd been called because his person was going to die. And the cop pulled him over, and he said, hey, obviously when you have the collar on helps. And he said, hey, here's what's going on. And the guy was like, yep, let's go on. So I think that is a lot of what I feel like what we're doing, because money is it's an emotional piece here, right? Because you go through all of this education, right? Maybe you to high school, and then you follow on with college. But what you're exchanging though is the life force, right? Time and talent for this, right? And you get someone who's maybe been doing something for 40 years, and it represents 40 years of their life. Could represent maybe missed opportunities with kids, right? Maybe a divorce or two, right? Or maybe unhealthy behavior in terms of eating, drinking, movement, right? And so I think that a lot of what we're doing is ministering to people to help them find their purpose and happiness and security, and avoid shame, guilt, and judgment.
It's a cool way of thinking of financial services.
It's super fascinating. It makes a ton of sense when you break it down. How do you fill the top end of your funnel with people who are going to align with that? Because that's a very specific, very differentiated, very unique way of looking at this wealth management industry, which to the layman is completely commoditized, completely interchangeable. At best, it's my local, Edward Jones type relationship where I can go down the street and see somebody, right? Your ambitions are clearly much different than that. How are you connecting with people on that?
Yeah, this is actually the $1 billion question, because everyone is all about like marketing and like workshops, and I find it similar to like finding new clients and also finding team members, right? Because we're super protective of our culture, both team and external with like our clients. And one of the things that what I found is that, we've grown almost 20-25% year over year, like every single year for like about the last like decade, which is pretty incredible. And here's the thing, we don't do any marketing. And what we found was that when you're actually transparent and vulnerable and letting people understand, being like, again, we pour into our clients. Like we want them to win. Like I want them to win in the worst way, because I know the natural outcome is that that's the best marketing you can have, right? People are going to talk to other people. Hey, do you have so-and-so? But we also, it's something that can and should be continually improved upon. But we've mostly grown just from people being like, hey, you need to meet with so-and-so. That is it. Our last, I think, 3 hires have not become from that we've had to go out on Indeed. It's literally, hey, I have someone that I think should be working here. Like they went and recruited them. That's like the ultimate compliment, by the way. Getting a referral from like a client, but getting a referral from our team.
Totally.
But the thing about it is, the thing that people don't understand is that because they've heard the song and dance, right? They're, oh, this is who we are. And there's really good people who are good at talking about it, but not really good at doing it. And so when people come into our team, it's like, they're like, I didn't believe when you were saying and talking about this culture until I was here. Right. But now we're contagious. Right. And I think the thing is how we work with our clients and how we treat our clients and what we do for clients. I had an outside consultant come in when we were making the transition to our own RA. And we showed them everything we do. And they were like, you provide the service of like what a family office would provide someone with like 20 or $30 million. And I just was like, well, to me, this is the experience that I want. Right. So I'm pouring in. So I think that's how we've been able to find. But it is like a call that I want to put out to other people, because here's the thing that I think that's happening, Ryan and Steven, is that just like I'm guessing you find with entrepreneurs, they think finding this incredible EA is this elusive thing. Like there's only so many of them out there. And you go, But if they only knew that it could be so different, right? And sometimes it's like they don't know until they know and they're wanting to know. But I think it's about you guys having this podcast. That's why people are going to know. Now knowing Steven, it's now I know what it is that you guys are doing. Like I hear someone looking for that correlation between happiness and accountability. I'm like, hey, you gotta go look up this company, like superpowers, right? Because if you're not, you're missing out. And I think it's the same thing that's about when people have experienced what we do at Evexia Wealth and they hear someone go, well, this is how I think that this financial services world has to be. And by the way, I'm not alone. I want to be clear. So if you're financial services and you're like, man, I do this, like I'm with you, I hear you. And the reality of it is like, this is where like collaborations have to happen. Like we have to have a stand here that people have it because there's 330 million Americans. Like this isn't competition, right? So anyways, that's how my viewpoint, Ryan, on like what you just said.
Yeah. The one tweak I would just throw in, just because we're having a conversation, it's interesting, Ben, is I actually find that most people actually on the opposite, they under index on what the impact of an assistant can be. They think that they're a dime a dozen. They think there are thousands of them, but really, really having curriculum, some of the things that we do is part of the experience, is part of how we do it, is actually just blows their mind of what's actually possible with that relationship. They tend to commoditize something that can be so impactful.
Well, biggest mistake. That is the biggest mistake. That is, if you're listening and you think a EA is like is a commodity, and it's like, here's the thing. I actually refuse to use in our organizations, all of them, the word employee and using the word assistant. And I know that in the world, like when people are looking, they go executive assistant. I call anyone who's basically in control of me a strategic partner. Keyword partner. Like that's if you don't have an executive assistant that you can plug in who can be a strategic partner, that right there is a 10x growth opportunity. Hard stop. So anyone who's listening to this, I know that we're talking about my business, but boy, like what you guys are doing is incredibly impactful.
Thanks, man.
Well, and what you said resonates tremendously on, sort of broadly, birds of a feather flock together, right? Whether it's clients who self-select into other clients who are just like them and going to be great fits, that transfers beautifully. And very similarly, I totally agree. It's the greatest honor to have somebody who is on our team serving in this executive assistant role for someone who has a friend, a family member, somebody they know, somebody that they care for, say, hey, you should come work over here because it's a good experience. It's a good culture. They'll take care of you. They'll do right by you. And of course, the quality of talent that walks through your front door when you're getting those types of referrals is just head and shoulders above anything you could go out and farm on your own.
Yeah. And by the way, that's where culture, I'm actually going to say, be an experienced company, because culture is actually probably one of the frameworks of the table of actually what makes great experience, is that you will never be commoditized. Coming out of like COVID, I'm hearing all these entrepreneurs talking about the hiring problem. Like whenever we when we have put out stuff, like we get 200-300 like applications. Like people want to come work for this organization. Like it seems like, well, why should I focus on culture? I'll just focus on pay. And I'm like, we've had people take less money because of what it is and who we are and what we have to like offer for them as a human being. And it's a non-commoditizable feature that makes you timeless. Going back to the word, right? Timeless.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to talk a little bit about, before we wrap up, your strategic coach experience, because I know so many of our listeners, so many of the folks that we're working for are strategic coach members. And so we have this beautiful shared vocabulary, the shared outlook and mindset about business. It's really a fantastic community. I've heard Dan say tongue in cheek that he really likes people as clients who are slow learners with money. And that those are the long-term, long clients of strategic coach. It seems like you're a fast learner, though. I think you said you joined Coach in 2015, and you're already now, less than a decade later, serving as an associate coach. What brought you to Coach? What resonated with you early on, and obviously got you deeper into that ecosystem? And then tell me a little bit of that transition from going from Coach member to coach at the front of the room, going from in the room to front of the room.
Yeah. And just if Dan was here, he would say, no, I want committed slow learners with deep pockets, which I love. I'm like, that's
even better.
That's me. So back in 2005, going to industry events, you hear someone on the main stage and they're like, I only worked 150 days a year. And I remember being like, oh, where do they live? And they're like, oh, on the West Coast, right? California, right? I'm like, oh, different clientele, right? Like a lot of money on the West Coast. And they must just be coming across all these, gobs of money that they're managing. And then I kept seeing correlations between all these people who just seem to be living a different life. And it took me from 2005 until 2015 for me to finally, again, that's that committed slow learner. That's where that was a slow learner part in here, is that I had all these like accomplishments that happened that for most people, if they were looking back and being like, wow, if I could hit that, I would just be so happy. And I found myself just going, this just feels like a record. It goes round and around and around again. And in my first coach workshop, I realized that strategic coach has something that no other entrepreneurial coaching that I've come across can like provide. There are no silver bullets, right? You got to show up and you got to bring your manufacturer, like your brain, to the room. You got to bring your heart, authenticity to the room. But what strategic coach was going to give to me, or help me actually not give to me, was going to give me the structure so that I could continually create a roadmap to joy. And I just remember that when I just realized I had that aha moment, I was like, this is going to be a lifetime commitment. Because when you think about a roadmap to joy, that's always ever expanding, right? Because who I am from 2015 to now is significantly different, right? My oldest daughter lives with me full time. I have almost a 3-year-old daughter. I had a son who was born and then passed, right? But the constant that has happened is that strategic coach has allowed me to constantly come back to this roadmap of my joy, right? And not only that, but it's allowed me to actually pour into others and help them build a roadmap of joy, right? It's like the world's greatest multi-level marketing company that you just continually pour in and give more and more joy. And so in 2015, I did that. I did 1 year at Signature. And then I realized that I could do this thing called 10X program. And the 10X program had this thing called the golden ticket. Again, when I first did that first investment it was a lot of money to me. Where I'm going like, wow. And so then when 10X, it was like, okay, well, it's a lot more money. But I realized that if I just went to a bunch of workshops, that cost per workshop went significantly down, number one. And number two is that I found that there's a correlation. Me being in the room, coming home, bringing so much joy with me, right? It was infectious. Everyone was like, globbing on, and it was effortless because I wasn't giving anything. It was just falling off the cart, right? It was like, oh, here's some. Is that I found that correlation to there. So what I started doing after my first year is I started doing 16 to 18 workshops a year. So even though I've been with Coach like 9 years, I think I have like 95 to 100 workshops. So like, I think in dog years, like, in coach years, it's like 21 plus years, right? And so that's why I came here. And here's just a real personal note, and I answer the question about what the difference was transitioning from client to coach. Here's the thing that for me, it all came full circle here, is that I just mentioned my son was born December 12th of 2023, and he passed away on December 28th. And I will forever be grateful to Strategic Coach because they gave me the clearest 16 days of my life. I've never been more present in my life. I've never been a bigger hero to like my wife as we're going through this. I've just never been more abundant. And the reality is I look back, it wasn't the outcome that we wanted, but it was such an intensely beautiful journey. And the fact that where I'm at today and like what's the ramifications, like my little baby boy, Benny, has changed my life in 16 days. He lived more in 16 days than I had in 41 years. And without coach, I'm not there to witness it. I'm not there to process. I'm not like there to process it. I'm not there to actually like understand the magnitude of what it is. And it's because I did the thing that most people don't want to do. I put the time in at coach, right? By the way, you don't need to go 16 to 18 workshops a year to get this. If you just go to the normal thing, I can tell you that people who stick around long enough, man, they are winning differently than other people. And it's so obvious. It's so obvious that they're winning differently. And so if you don't have someone like a strategic coach and you're listening to this, like, don't wait a decade to sign up, because let me tell you, it is an absolute game changer, and I'm forever grateful. And strategic coach, it's not an expense anymore. It's literally like breathing. That's what it's like to me. It's strategic coach is breathing. And the fact is that I breathe different air now as a result of strategic coach. So I think that's answers your first question. And I'd be curious, Stephen, this is my experience, right? So Stephen is about 5 years ahead of me in this like coach journey. So I'll be curious to see how this correlates with you in your experience. Number one, it's for a company, as you clearly saw and heard, like had such an impact on me, to be asked to be on front of that room is like a lifetime achievement, right? A company that has built so much winning in my life, it goes, hey, I think that you could help other people win. Is one of the greatest honors. And with that honor comes, I think, a huge level of like a sense of purpose, but also a sense of responsibility and accountability for me to continue on my own journey as a client. So even though I'm coaching, is that, and just like Stephen, is that we are still sitting in that chair every 90 days, thinking about our thinking, doing awesome stuff, continue to be entrepreneurs. But as a coach, I have to tell you, it's the most fun I've ever had in my life. It is the most fun, in part because you're looking around the room and you're like, that guy's going to be a billionaire. She is going to change the world. Hey, this person has no idea like that they're on this trajectory. If they just stick to it, like it's going to be an epic ride. And you get like 4 to 8 days a quarter where you get to have that opportunity and you see it. And honestly, it's interesting is that even though I'm coaching, is that I'm being inspired to aspire. And I think that's like just such an incredible gift, such an incredible opportunity. And it makes me actually come into the room a little bit differently as a client, being like, man, like if I could be a student that I'd want in front of me, like here's like the mindset that I'd like to come into this. There are no sacred cows. Like, could I just find a word, how someone just does a question differently? Or is there something that someone's given themselves permission to that I just don't have to be that committed slow learner? I can actually accelerate on my journey of being a slow committed learner, right? So yeah, that's my journey.
That's beautiful, man. And all I'd have to say to that is amen. Probably a familiar word in your household growing up, is amen. I want to just acknowledge something because you brought it up in here, and I've watched you as you've gone through this journey and becoming a coach, and your complete generosity around the loss of your son, Benny, has been really, really moving and powerful to see in so many ways. I've shared with you, that growing up, my brother passed away, and just how challenging that was, and the chain of pain that got unleashed in our family from my parents really not having a great way of working through that. And I have no judgment because I it's like my worst nightmare, but to see you walk through it, the way that you've handled, the way you've had your road map back to joy, the way you've poured in others, and even with really with what you're doing with this, and I want you to talk about it, this 16 Days Foundation. It's just been really inspirational, and with something that's just, I can only imagine how difficult it has been. So anyway, I just want to acknowledge that and thank you, because you in a way have been a coach to me, watching you just walk through that and walk that out.
Wow. Well, thank you. And I know when you shared that story, that, by the way, this is what happens when you do share. All of a sudden you find out like, hey, like this shaped you, Stephen. And then it's like this another shared like bond. And yeah, it's the Benny passing has been transformational, and part of I think the thing that I keep thinking about is again, some of these decisions that we had to make was this idea of, are you being alive or living? And I think that there's a big difference between those two. Living is like where you're being abundant and external. And it's like one of the things that when Jenna and I looked at, hey, how do we keep Benny living out there? I mean, I guess got to tell you that his soul was just so big. It was so big. I had a buddy and Stephen, Reagan, he just had sent me this text. He goes, it's too bad that his physical body couldn't support his beautiful soul. And that's really true. So one of the things that when Jenna and I were there, again, in our own, like dealing with all these different things, is that we are in a children's hospital. If you haven't been in children's hospital, man, amazing. If you have one near you, have someone who works there, please give them a hug. Especially NICU nurses. If you NICU nurses are amazing. So I don't know if they'll ever listen to us, but Paula, Shelby, Kylie, and Crystal, like angels. They're angels, and they'll forever be angels in my mind. But when you're walking through the halls and you're getting there at 5:30 a.m. and then staying until 12:30 a.m. and just getting a little time so that you can like just sleep real quick, get a quick recharge, and you're back, and you do that 16 days in a row. One of the things you start noticing is when you're spending a lot of time there is that there's a lot of babies there. And so the children's hospital where we were at had 72 beds, all full with babies. And they were level 4 NICU, so it's the highest level. They have like rooms like where there's babies who have like their stomachs, intestines are born outside of like their stomach. And thank God for modern medicine. I mean, it's crazy as they build this little shell, and then their body naturally takes back in and reintegrates like all that stuff naturally. It's amazing. But the thing that was really startling to me is about 75% of those rooms did not have parents in them. So you think about like the greatest gift that we have, regardless of where you live, is that it's these babies, these innocent, like just beautiful treasures that are they're there. And these nurses who are amazing, get a chance to like try to hold them as much as possible. But there's nothing that beats the presence of a parent, the advocation for that child by the parent. And when talking about it, is that a lot of these kids and these babies are from farther away, and so it's expensive to be there. And that what it came down to was that it seemed that a lot of parents have to choose between paying their bills and being with their kids. And it's a real thing, right? Like we've all like experienced the fact is like, hey, if you had to be gone, because some of these babies are in for like 6, 7, 8 months. And so what Jenna and I realized is that what we wanted Benny's gift of continuing to give to the world was the freedom of time for parents and their kids. And so one of the things that we have done, we're actually just the final touches of this are going up. We got the articles of corporation done. It's got a charity called 16 Days. And our goal is to buy back that freedom of time for parents and kids. And our goal is to buy back 1 million days for parents and kids. And that we want to be able to give grants in the form of 16 days, because that's the time that we got with our little boy and the preciousness of that. And so our hope is that we're going to have the website up here in the next 2 to 3 weeks. and so that we can start raising money and then start to be able to work with NICUs to be able to buy back that freedom of time between parents and babies.
It's incredible. That's really, really unbelievable. And Ben, thank you so much for sharing such an incredible, such a raw, such a recent story. It really puts everything that you said in the first 50 minutes here together into perspective in such a big way in the last 10 minutes here. So I think that's a wonderful place to leave it. Ben, I really appreciate you being a guest with us. There's so many takeaways from me. I know Stephen, I'm sure, has many as well, but just some things that stood out to me from earlier in the conversation is this theme of is it timeless? And that applied in everything from the aesthetic to the culture of your business to the very product and service that you're delivering. I loved the framing of self-managing company in the context of trust and the meaning, the through line of trust in a self-managing company. We talked a little bit about how the best conduit to trust is finding and hiring people who align with your core values. And you expanded on that. You talked about how, it's a trust enhancer to be in charge, not in control, and developing other leaders within the business. And then, just you inspired me to use my golden ticket more. I need to do that. It's a good reminder that, the strategic coach speed run does exist. And it's obviously had incredible impact for you. And just again, it was especially inspired by the story of Benny and how he continues to live on through your 16 Days Foundation. That's very incredible. It's incredible. So thank you for sharing all of that. And thank you for being a guest today. It's really been a phenomenal opportunity to get to meet you and to have this conversation together.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for having me on, and thanks for just great conversation, thoughtful questions, and you guys have a super generous curiosity that is, you guys aren't like top 10 in Apple Podcasts or whatever these ratings are. You guys should be, because it's generous.
I think we're like 11 or 12 any given day. We're so close.
Your endorsement, we're there, man. We're there.
I love it. And thank you for letting me share about Benny. It is when I talk about him, he feels like he's living within me. And so I appreciate you creating a format and allowing me to be able to talk about it. And again, thank you so much for having me. This was incredible. And thanks for just great conversation.
Ben, it was awesome, man. I really appreciate everything. And I really, really appreciate something you said that stuck to me is the talking versus doing. And I love just seeing the way that you're in motion. So keep it up, brother. I love you, man. And more to come.
Yeah. Feelings mutual. Love you too, man.
Thanks, Ben.